Morning. It is Saturday, November 20th, and we are gathered for our morning devotion. And this one is called Presence, Part 2, the rest of the story, if you will, from Mark chapter 2, verses 25 through 28. In the days of Abiathar, the high priest, David entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for the priest to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to him, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." The disciples were walking from town to town with Jesus, listening to him teach and watching him heal. More than that, they were getting to know him on a personal and intimate level. They were hanging out and telling stories, laughing, eating, sleeping. They were communing with him. I'm guessing the more time they spent with Jesus, the less anyone else's opinion of them mattered. Then again, the Pharisees had power, and there were consequences for breaking Sabbath law, like imprisonment and even death by stoning. I imagine the moment of confrontation had a few of the disciples shaking in their sandals. Perhaps the hotheads were clenching their fists. Maybe a few were so sick of religious regulations that they've grown apathetic. Regardless, all disciples' eyes were on Jesus as he stood his ground in the field of grain. And then he took the ground and told them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even on the Sabbath." Two sentences that were not great for the Pharisees' relations. The Sabbath was made for man. Verse 27 meant that one of God's purpose in creating the law was to bless. He wanted people to rest and to refuel, to spend time with family and friends, and to be intentional about remembering God's blessing, God's provisions, and God's constant presence. The Sabbath was intended to be life-giving and in harmony with the first observance, the day God rested for creating all things. Conversely, not man for the Sabbath, which is the rest of verse 27, meant that man was not supposed to be burdened by rules as if serving it. God simply desired communion with his people. Void of the task and distracted them during the week, he wanted them to be present with him and for them to be more aware of his presence with them, the basic requirement for any healthy relationship. But then the conversation gets dicey. So the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath. Up to that point, perhaps a few of the Pharisees were tracking with Jesus. Lest we impinge King David, perhaps this plucking thing wasn't worth our time. And he's right that God made the Sabbath for our good. Since these men were just eating and not cooking, we're probably beating off a little more than we could chew. But wait, did he just simply imply that he's the Lord of the Sabbath? Yes. Jesus repeatedly referred to himself as the Son of Man, a reference not lost on the Pharisees or on the prophecy experts he was talking to. It's how Daniel referred to the coming Messiah in the 6th century BC. And now Jesus used it to refer to himself and assert the only logical conclusion, that he is Lord. He rules over the Sabbath. First David, then Daniel. It was a 1-2 Old Testament punch that threw the Pharisees off balance enough to end the exchange right there, for the time being anyway. Here's the irony. The Pharisees' regulations, which protected the tabernacle pomp and circumstances they adhered to, and the Sabbath they rest, so that they so keenly enforced, all for the purpose of acknowledging and honoring God's presence. Yet standing in front of them was the one their lives revolve around, and they refused to see it. The disciples saw it. The needy crowds that came from far and wide saw it. But these men, so close to the proximity of Jesus, both physically and intellectually, somehow could not. Perhaps if they'd been more willing to set aside the distracting tasks of the day in exchange for more of God's presence, they could have, because he was in their room. And so our prayer focus: ask God to forgive you for when you prioritize other things over God's presence, and ask God for eyes to see him when God's near. And so our moving forward questions: what do you prioritize over spending in time in God's presence? In what areas of your life are you rejoicing Christ's lordship? What is your favorite thing about spending time with God? And what do you need to change to be able to spend more time with God?